What happens when one of America's most beloved rock icons walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a friendly conversation about his legacy, only to find himself in the most heated exchange of his entire career? Bruce Springsteen, the man who gave us Born to Run, Born in the USA, and decades of anthems about the American working class, sat down on The View for what was supposed to be a light-hearted chat about his latest album and upcoming tour. Instead, what unfolded was a verbal showdown that had the studio audience gasping, the co-hosts scrambling, and social media absolutely erupting within minutes. Before we dive into exactly what was said and how this situation escalated so dramatically, make sure you subscribe to this channel and drop a comment below telling us what you think about celebrity interviews getting heated. Do hosts cross the line sometimes, or is tough questioning just part of the job? Now let's get into what actually happened on that stage. Bruce Springsteen walked out to thunderous applause, waving to the audience with that familiar, humble smile. The crowd was on their feet, and you could feel the energy in the room. This was the boss, after all, a living legend who has soundtracked the lives of millions. Joy Behar opened with what seemed like a warm welcome, telling him how thrilled they all were to have him on the show. The other co-hosts chimed in with their own praise, talking about how his music had impacted their lives, how his concerts were legendary, how he represented something authentic in an industry that often felt manufactured. But then, just as everyone was settling into what they thought would be a typical celebrity interview, Joy shifted gears. She leaned forward, her expression changing from warm to something more pointed, and said, "You know, Bruce, I have to ask you something that I think a lot of people are wondering about. Your music has always been about the working man, the forgotten people, the ones struggling to get by. You have built your entire brand on being the voice of everyday Americans. But here is what I do not understand. You are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You live in a massive estate. You have not had to worry about money in decades. So how do you reconcile that with the image you have been selling all these years? Are you not just another wealthy entertainer at this point, singing about struggles you no longer understand?" The studio went quiet. You could feel the tension immediately. The other co-hosts glanced at each other, clearly not expecting Joy to go there so quickly and so directly. Bruce, for his part, kept his composure. He nodded slowly, like he had heard variations of this question before, and he took a breath before responding. He said, "Well, Joy, I appreciate the question, I really do. But I think you are operating under a misunderstanding of what my music has always been about. I have never claimed to be struggling financially. I have been very fortunate, incredibly fortunate, and I have never hidden that. But what I have tried to do, what I have always tried to do, is tell the stories of people whose voices are not heard. Just because I am not living paycheck to paycheck anymore does not mean I have forgotten where I came from or the people I grew up with. My job as an artist is to shine a light on experiences that matter, not to only write about my own personal circumstances." Joy was not satisfied with that answer. She shook her head and interrupted before he could continue. "But Bruce, come on," she said, her voice rising slightly. "You are telling these stories from a place of enormous privilege now. You fly private jets. You play stadiums. You charge hundreds of dollars for tickets. How is that staying connected to the working class? How is that not just performative? You are selling an image of authenticity while living a lifestyle that is completely disconnected from the people you claim to represent." Bruce's jaw tightened. You could see it on his face, the shift from patient explanation to something closer to frustration. He leaned forward and said, "Joy, with all due respect, I think you are conflating two different things here. Yes, I have been successful. Yes, I have made money from my music. But that does not erase the legitimacy of the stories I tell or the sincerity behind them. I did not grow up wealthy. I grew up in a small town in New Jersey where my father worked factory jobs and struggled to keep our family afloat. Those experiences shaped me. They are part of who I am. And just because I have achieved financial success does not mean I have abandoned those roots or that I am not allowed to speak about the issues that still affect millions of people." Joy shot back immediately. "But are you speaking about them, or are you profiting off of them? There is a difference, Bruce. You have made a fortune by packaging the struggles of the working class into 3-minute songs and selling them to the masses. That is capitalism, not activism. That is not being a voice for the voiceless. That is being a businessman who found a lucrative niche. The audience was split. Some people were nodding along with Joy. Others were visibly uncomfortable, and a few were shaking their heads in disagreement. Bruce sat back in his chair, and for a moment he just looked at her. Then he said, "You know what, Joy? I think what you are really asking me is whether I have the right to talk about these issues because I am not poor anymore. And that is a dangerous road to go down. By that logic, no one who achieves any level of success is allowed to advocate for people who are struggling. No one who makes it out is allowed to look back and say, 'Hey, this system is broken, and we need to fix it.' That is absurd." Joy was not backing down. She leaned in even closer and said, "I am not saying you cannot advocate for people. I am saying that your advocacy rings hollow when you are simultaneously benefiting from the very system you critique. You sing about economic inequality while you are in the top 1%. You sing about the struggles of the working man while you are making deals worth millions. How is that not hypocritical?" Bruce's voice grew louder, more forceful. "Because, Joy, I am using my platform to bring attention to issues that would otherwise be ignored. I am not sitting on my wealth and staying silent. I am speaking out. I am supporting causes. I am trying to make a difference. And yes, I have been fortunate enough to make money doing what I love, but that does not disqualify me from caring about people who have not had the same opportunities. You are essentially saying that once someone becomes successful, they lose the right to fight for others, and I fundamentally reject that." The other co-hosts were trying to step in now, sensing that things were getting out of hand. One of them tried to lighten the mood, making a comment about how passionate both of them were, but Joy waved her off. She was locked in. She said, "Bruce, I am not trying to attack you personally. I am just trying to understand how you square this circle. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot be the everyman and the millionaire at the same time." Bruce stood up slightly in his seat, his voice now cutting through the tension. "Actually, Joy, I can. Because the everyman is not defined by how much money is in his bank account. It is defined by values. It is defined by integrity. It is defined by whether or not you remember where you came from, and whether or not you use whatever platform you have to fight for people who do not have one. And I have spent my entire career doing exactly that. So if you want to question my sincerity, fine. But do not question my commitment to the people and the principles that have always driven my music." The studio was electric now. The audience did not know whether to applaud or stay silent. Joy, clearly not expecting Bruce to push back this hard, paused for a moment. Then she said, "Well, I think we are just going to have to agree to disagree on this one." But Bruce was not done. He said, "No, Joy, we are not going to agree to disagree. Because what you are doing right now is exactly what is wrong with how we talk about these issues in this country. You are more interested in tearing down someone who is trying to help than you are in actually addressing the problems. You are more interested in pointing out perceived hypocrisy than you are in acknowledging the work that is being done. And that is why nothing ever changes." Joy's eyes widened at that. She sat up straighter and said, "Excuse me? Are you seriously suggesting that I am the problem here? I am asking you legitimate questions, Bruce. Questions that plenty of people have about celebrities who profit from social issues. You do not get to turn this around on me just because you do not like being challenged." Bruce shook his head, his frustration now fully visible. "I am not turning anything around, Joy. I am pointing out that your line of questioning is based on a flawed premise. You are acting like caring about social issues and being financially successful are mutually exclusive, and they are not. Some of the most effective advocates for change in history have been people with resources and platforms. Should they have just stayed quiet because they were not poor? Should Martin Luther King have stopped speaking out because he had a doctoral degree? Should anyone who achieves any measure of success be disqualified from fighting for others? That is what you are implying, whether you realize it or not." Joy leaned back and crossed her arms. "That is not what I am saying at all, and you know it. What I am saying is that there is something fundamentally uncomfortable about watching a multimillionaire sing songs about poverty and struggle while living in luxury. It feels performative. It feels like you are using other people's pain as material for your art. And that sits wrong with a lot of people. Bruce's response came quick and sharp. You know what sits wrong with me, Joy? The fact that we live in a country where people are working 2, 3 jobs and still cannot afford rent, where healthcare can bankrupt a family, where kids are going to school hungry. That sits wrong with me. And if I can use my music, my platform, my voice to draw attention to those realities, then I am going to do it. And I am not going to apologize for being successful while doing it. Because the alternative is silence, and silence helps no one. One of the other co-hosts, clearly trying to de-escalate, jumped in and said, I think what Joy is trying to get at, Bruce, is just the question of credibility. You know, when someone is speaking from lived experience versus speaking from observation. Both are valuable, but they are different. Bruce turned to her and said, I appreciate that, and I understand the distinction. But here is what I would say to that. My music has always been rooted in the stories of real people. I have spent my life listening to people, talking to people, understanding their struggles. I did not just wake up one day and decide to write about the working class as some kind of marketing strategy. I lived it. My family lived it. And even though my circumstances have changed, those experiences do not just disappear. They are part of my DNA. So when I write a song about a factory closing or a family losing their home, it is not abstract to me. It is not some intellectual exercise. It is real. Joy jumped back in, her tone still sharp. But Bruce, you have to admit that your perspective has changed. You are not the same person you were when you were 25 and struggling to make it. You have spent decades at the top. You have been insulated from the everyday struggles that most people face. So how can you claim to still understand what it is like to be one of those people? Bruce's voice dropped lower, more intense. Because I pay attention, Joy. Because I listen. Because I have not isolated myself in some bubble where I only interact with other wealthy people. I talk to fans after shows. I read letters. I stay connected. And beyond that, I have eyes. I can see what is happening in this country. I can see the inequality. I can see the suffering. You do not have to be personally experiencing something to recognize that it is wrong and to want to do something about it. Joy was relentless. But you are not doing something about it, Bruce. You are singing about it. There is a difference between activism and entertainment. You are an entertainer who has built a brand around blue-collar struggles. That is not the same as actually fighting for change. The audience gasped audibly at that. Bruce looked genuinely stunned for a moment. Then he said, slowly and deliberately, Joy, I have donated millions of dollars to food banks, homeless shelters, veterans organizations, and community programs. I have played countless benefit concerts. I have used my platform to advocate for policies that would actually help working families. So do not sit there and tell me I am not doing anything. You have no idea what I do beyond what you see on stage. Joy fired back immediately. And that is great, Bruce. Truly. But it still does not change the fact that you are fundamentally disconnected from the people you claim to represent. You can donate all the money you want, but at the end of the day, you go home to your mansion, and they go home to their struggles. That disconnect matters. Bruce stood up from his chair, not to leave, but to emphasize his point. He pointed at Joy and said, You want to talk about disconnect? Let me tell you what disconnect is. Disconnect is sitting in a television studio, making millions of dollars yourself, and spending your time attacking someone who is trying to use their voice for good, instead of actually talking about the issues. You are more interested in playing gotcha with me than you are in discussing the real problems facing this country. And that, Joy, is the real disconnect. The other co-hosts were now visibly trying to regain control of the conversation. One of them said, Okay, I think we all need to take a breath here. This is clearly a passionate conversation, and I think both of you are coming from places of genuine belief. But Joy was not finished. She looked directly at Bruce and said, I am not playing gotcha. I am asking you to be honest about who you are and what you represent. You are not some working-class hero, Bruce. You are a rock star, a very wealthy rock star. And I think it is time you stopped pretending otherwise. Bruce's face flushed red. He took a step closer to the table and said, I have never pretended to be anything I am not, Joy. Never. I have always been honest about my life, my success, and where I came from. What I will not do is let you or anyone else tell me that my success somehow invalidates the stories I tell or the causes I care about. That is nonsense, and frankly, it is insulting, not just to me but to everyone who has supported my music because they see themselves in it. Joy shook her head. They see themselves in it because you have sold them a fantasy, Bruce. You have sold them the idea that you are one of them, when you have not been one of them for 40 years. The audience was now divided between scattered applause for Joy and murmurs of disagreement. Bruce took a deep breath, visibly trying to compose himself, and said, "Joy, I do not know what your goal is here. I do not know if you are trying to make a point, or if you genuinely believe what you are saying, or if this is just good television for you. But what I do know is this. My music has connected with millions of people over the course of my career. People who feel seen, who feel heard, who feel like someone is telling their story. And no amount of cynicism from you or anyone else is going to change that. Those connections are real. The impact is real, and I am proud of it." Joy leaned forward, her expression hardening. "I am not being cynical, Bruce. I am being realistic. And the reality is that you are part of the elite now, whether you want to admit it or not. You can dress it up in blue jeans and guitars all you want, but at the end of the day, you are in the same class as the people you claim to be speaking out against." Bruce's voice rose again. "I am not speaking out against wealthy people, Joy. I am speaking out against a system that leaves too many people behind. There is a difference. I have never demonized success. What I have demonized is greed, indifference, and a lack of compassion. And if you cannot see the difference, then I do not know what to tell you." Another co-host tried again to steer the conversation. She said, "Bruce, let me ask you this. Do you ever worry that your message gets lost because of the perception issue that Joy is bringing up? That people might dismiss what you are saying because of your wealth?" Bruce turned to her, seeming relieved to have a more reasonable question. He said, "Of course I worry about that. Any artist worries about whether their message is getting through. But at the end of the day, all I can do is be authentic and hope that people understand my intentions. I cannot control how I am perceived, but I can control my actions and my words. And I have always tried to be consistent in both." Joy interjected again. "But your actions and your words do not match, Bruce. That is my entire point. You talk about solidarity with the working class while you live a life that is completely removed from their reality. How is that consistent?" Bruce spun back to face her, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Because consistency is not about living in poverty to prove a point, Joy. Consistency is about staying true to your values regardless of your circumstances. I have always believed in fighting for people who do not have a voice. I believed it when I was broke, and I believe it now. My bank account has changed, but my values have not. And if you cannot accept that, then that is your problem, not mine." Joy stood up now too, matching his energy. She said, "It is not my problem, Bruce. It is the problem of every person out there who is tired of being lectured to by millionaires about struggles they no longer face. You want to talk about values? Fine. But do not expect people to take you seriously when you are preaching from a position of such incredible privilege." Bruce threw his hands up in frustration. "There it is again. This idea that privilege somehow disqualifies you from caring. That is such a lazy argument, Joy. It is a way of shutting down conversation instead of engaging with the actual issues. And you know what? It is exactly what powerful people want. They want us fighting about who has the right to speak, instead of fighting about the actual injustices that need to be addressed. You are playing right into that." Joy's voice grew louder. "Do not patronize me, Bruce. Do not stand there and act like I am too naive to understand what is really going on. I understand perfectly well. What I am questioning is your authenticity. And I have every right to do that," Bruce shot back, "and I have every right to defend myself against baseless accusations. You are not questioning my authenticity based on facts. You are questioning it based on your own preconceived notions about what someone in my position should or should not be saying. That is not journalism, Joy. That is just bias." One of the other co-hosts, looking increasingly uncomfortable, tried to interject. She said, "You know, I think there is maybe some common ground here that we are missing. Bruce, you have dedicated your career to telling important stories. Joy, you are asking important questions about accountability and authenticity. Maybe we can find a way to bridge this." But neither Bruce nor Joy seemed interested in bridging anything at that moment. Joy turned to her co-host and said, "I appreciate what you are trying to do, but I am not backing down from this. Bruce is selling an image that I believe is fundamentally dishonest, and I think the public deserves to hear that perspective." Bruce looked at her with disbelief. "Fundamentally dishonest? Are you kidding me right now? You are accusing me of being a fraud on national television, and you think that is just asking important questions? That is character assassination, Joy. And it is based on nothing but your own cynical worldview." Joy responded sharply, "It is not cynical to expect consistency from public figures. It is not cynical to point out when someone's lifestyle contradicts their message. And it is certainly not character assassination to ask you to explain yourself." Bruce paced for a moment, running his hand through his hair. He turned back to Joy and said, "You want me to explain myself? Fine. Here is the explanation. I grew up in a town where people worked hard their entire lives and had nothing to show for it. I watched my father struggle with depression because he could not provide for his family the way he wanted to. I watched neighbors lose their homes. I watched friends give up on their dreams because they had to take whatever job they could find just to survive. Those experiences shaped me. They made me who I am. And when I started making music, I wanted to honor those people. I wanted to tell their stories. And yes, I became successful doing it. But that does not make the stories any less true. It does not make my connection to them any less real. And it certainly does not give you the right to dismiss everything I have done as some kind of act." Joy sat back down, her expression still defiant. "I am not dismissing everything you have done, Bruce. I am questioning whether you have the credibility to keep doing it. And I think that is a fair question." Bruce remained standing. He looked down at her and said, "Credibility is not determined by how much money you have or do not have. Credibility is determined by your track record, your consistency, and your integrity. And I will put my track record up against anyone's. I have been telling these stories for 50 years. I have been supporting these communities for 50 years. I have been fighting for these causes for 50 years. So if you want to question my credibility, you better come with more than just, 'Well, you are rich now, so you do not get to care anymore.'" Another co-host attempted to shift the conversation once more. She said, "Bruce, let me ask you something. How do you respond to your critics, not just Joy but others who make similar points, without getting defensive? Because I think that is part of what is happening here." Bruce took a breath and sat back down, though he was clearly still agitated. He said, "Look, I do not mind being criticized. I have been criticized my entire career. People have said my music is too political, not political enough, too nostalgic, too angry, too hopeful. I have heard it all. But what bothers me about this particular criticism is that it is designed to silence. It is not meant to start a conversation. It is meant to end one. It is meant to say, you do not belong in this discussion anymore because you are successful. And I reject that entirely." Joy seized on that. "Bruce, no one is trying to silence you. You have one of the biggest platforms in the world. You are literally on television right now. How can you claim you are being silenced?" Bruce looked at her intently. "Because you are trying to delegitimize my voice. You are trying to say that I should not be speaking about these issues. That is a form of silencing. Just because I have a platform does not mean I am immune to people trying to undermine my message. And that is exactly what you are doing." Joy shook her head vigorously. "I am not trying to undermine your message. I am trying to examine it critically. There is a difference." Bruce leaned forward. "Is there? Because from where I am sitting, It seems like you have already made up your mind about me. You have decided that I am a hypocrite, and now you are just looking for ways to justify that conclusion. That is not critical examination. That is confirmation bias. The tension in the studio was suffocating now. The audience was completely silent, transfixed by what was unfolding. Joy said, "You know what, Bruce? Maybe I have made up my mind. Maybe I have watched you for years, singing your songs about the downtrodden while living like royalty. And maybe I have come to the conclusion that there is something deeply problematic about that. And maybe I am not the only one." Bruce stood up again, his voice now booming. "Then say that, Joy. Say that you think I am a hypocrite. Say that you think my entire career has been a lie. Have the courage to actually make the accusation instead of hiding behind questions. Because that is what you are doing. You are making accusations disguised as inquiries, and it is cowardly." Joy stood up too, her face flushed. "Cowardly? You want to talk about courage, Bruce? How about the courage to admit that you are not who you pretend to be? How about the courage to acknowledge that your connection to the working class is a relic of the past, not a present reality?" Bruce stepped closer to the table, his voice shaking with anger. "I am not hiding behind anything. I have been honest about my life, my struggles, and my success. What I will not do is pretend that success means I have to stop caring about people who are still struggling. What I will not do is abandon my principles just because I have money. And what I will not do is sit here and let you attack my character based on nothing but your own assumptions." Joy matched his intensity. "They are not assumptions, Bruce. They are observations, and a lot of people share them. You can get as angry as you want, but it does not change the facts. You are a wealthy man singing about poverty. You are an elite singing about the everyman, and no amount of indignation is going to make that contradiction disappear." Bruce slammed his hand on the table, causing everyone to jump. "The contradiction is in your head, Joy, not in my life. I have never claimed to be something I am not. I have never pretended that I am currently struggling financially. What I have done is use my platform to shine a light on people who are. And if that makes me a hypocrite in your eyes, then so be it. But do not expect me to apologize for caring about something bigger than myself." One of the other co-hosts, now visibly shaken, said, "Okay, I think we really need to take a break here. This has clearly become very heated, and I think everyone needs a moment to cool down." But Joy was not done. She said, "No, we are not taking a break. We are going to finish this conversation. Bruce, you came on this show, and you are going to answer for the image you have been selling for decades." Bruce stared at her, his jaw clenched. "I do not need to answer to you, Joy. I answer to my fans. I answer to the people whose lives have been touched by my music. I answer to my own conscience. And all of those tell me that I am doing the right thing. So you can sit there and judge me all you want, but it means nothing." Joy's eyes narrowed. "It means nothing? Your credibility means nothing? The trust of your audience means nothing?" Bruce's voice was ice cold now. "My credibility is intact. My audience trusts me. The only person in this room questioning that is you. And frankly, I am starting to wonder what your real agenda is here. Is this about me? Or is this about you trying to make a name for yourself by taking down someone people respect?" Joy looked genuinely offended. "That is completely out of line, Bruce. This is not about me. This is about holding you accountable." Bruce laughed bitterly. "Accountable for what? For being successful? For caring about people? For using my voice? What exactly am I being held accountable for?" Joy responded, "For profiting off of other people's struggles. For building a brand on authenticity, while living inauthentically. For convincing people that you are one of them when you are not." Bruce shook his head slowly. "You just do not get it, do you? You do not understand what my music means to people. You do not understand the connection that exists between me and my fans. It is not about money. It is not about class. It is about shared values. It is about stories that resonate. It is about believing that we can do better as a society. And you want to reduce all of that to some kind of capitalist transaction. That is what is really insulting here." Joy crossed her arms. I understand perfectly well what your music means to people. What I am saying is that the foundation of that connection is built on a false premise. You have presented yourself as one thing while being another. That is not me being cynical. That is me being honest. Bruce took a step back and looked at her with something close to pity. You know what, Joy? I feel sorry for you. I really do. Because you are so locked into this cynical worldview that you cannot see anything else. You cannot imagine that someone might genuinely care about issues beyond their own personal circumstances. You cannot conceive of the idea that success does not erase empathy. And that is sad. Joy's face went red. Do not you dare feel sorry for me. I am asking tough questions that need to be asked. Just because you do not like them does not mean they are not valid. Bruce raised his voice again. They are not valid, Joy. They are based on a fundamentally flawed understanding of who I am and what I do. You are attacking a caricature of me that exists only in your imagination. You have decided that because I have money, I must be disconnected. Because I am successful, I must be insincere. Because I live comfortably, I must be a fraud. None of that is based on reality. It is based on your assumptions. Joy turned sharply. There is nothing constructive about letting someone off the hook for hypocrisy. Bruce needs to be confronted with these questions, and I am not going to stop just because it is uncomfortable. Bruce pointed at Joy. That right there. That is the problem. You are not interested in a conversation. You are interested in a confrontation. You came into this with your mind made up, and nothing I say is going to change it. So what is the point? Joy leaned forward. The point is accountability, Bruce. The point is transparency. The point is not letting celebrities coast on their reputations without ever being challenged. Bruce threw his hands up. What I am not going to accept is being challenged by someone who is arguing in bad faith. Someone who is more interested in scoring points than understanding the truth. Joy stood up and moved around the table slightly. Bad faith? You think I am arguing in bad faith? I am asking you questions that millions of people are thinking. Just because they make you uncomfortable does not mean they are illegitimate. Bruce matched her movement. They are illegitimate when they are based on false premises. They are illegitimate when they ignore decades of evidence to the contrary. They are illegitimate when they are designed to tear down rather than understand. Joy said, I do not need the audience to tell me that I am right to question Bruce. This is between him and me, and we are going to settle it. Bruce stared at her. There is nothing to settle, Joy. You have made your accusations. I have defended myself. You do not believe me. I do not care. We are done here. He started to remove his microphone and Joy said, Oh, so you are just going to walk out? You are going to run away when the questions get too hard? Bruce stopped and turned back to her, his face a mask of barely controlled anger. I am not running away from anything. I am refusing to participate in a witch hunt. There is a difference. You are not interested in dialogue. You are interested in destruction. And I will not be part of that. Joy raised her voice. This is not a witch hunt. This is journalism. This is asking powerful people to explain themselves. Bruce shouted back, This is not journalism. Journalism requires objectivity, fairness, and a willingness to actually listen to the answers you get. You have none of those things. You came in here with an agenda and you are executing it. Joy shouted louder, And what you do is capitalism disguised as activism. So I guess we are both guilty of something. The studio was in chaos now. The audience was murmuring loudly. The other co-hosts were trying to restore order, and both Bruce and Joy were standing their ground. One of the co-hosts finally raised her voice above the noise and said, We are going to take a commercial break. Right now, everyone just stop. But Bruce was not finished. He looked directly into the camera and said, I want to say something to the people watching at home. My music comes from an honest place. It always has. I am not perfect. I have made mistakes. But I have never lied about who I am or what I believe. And I am not going to let anyone tell me that caring about others is somehow wrong because I have been fortunate in my life. Joy immediately responded, also looking at the camera. And I want to say something to people watching at home too. Do not let celebrities manipulate you with emotional appeals. Bruce Springsteen is a wealthy man who has built his career on the image of being a working-class hero. And it is okay to question that. Bruce turned to her one more time. "You can question whatever you want, Joy, but when you question my sincerity, when you question my commitment, when you question my integrity, you better be prepared for me to push back. And that is what I am doing." Joy met his gaze. "And I am pushing back against a narrative that is false and manipulative. So I guess we will just have to let the public decide who is right." Bruce nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess we will." The cameras cut to commercial, and the tension remained thick in the air. When they came back, the co-host said, "We are back, and I think it is clear that Bruce and Joy have very different perspectives on this issue. Bruce, as we wrap up, is there anything you want to say to clarify your position?" Bruce said, "I think I have been pretty clear. I am not going to apologize for being successful. I am not going to apologize for caring about people. And I am not going to let anyone tell me that those two things are incompatible. My music speaks for itself." The co-host turned to Joy. "And Joy, what about you?" Joy said, "My final thought is that we need to be more critical of the people we idolize. We need to ask hard questions. Bruce is entitled to his perspective, but so am I. And I am not going to pretend this conversation changed my mind, because it did not." Bruce muttered, "That makes two of us." The co-host said, "Well, I think we have certainly given our audience a lot to think about today. Bruce, thank you for being here." Bruce nodded curtly but said nothing. The show moved on, but the interview had already become one of the most contentious exchanges in talk show history. So what do you think about all of this? Was Joy right to challenge Bruce the way she did, or did she cross a line? Make sure you subscribe to this channel and drop a comment below. Do you think successful people lose the right to speak about social issues? Or does success give them an even bigger responsibility to use their platform for good? Let us know what you think.